Right, welcome along to our Stress and Overwhelm month. Today we're talking to Claire Doherty. Claire, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Claire. I'm a medical intuitive and a registered nutritional therapist and chartered physiotherapist, and I am honoured to be here to speak to you today.
Thank you. So for the month of December, we're talking about stress and overwhelm because obviously it's a pretty stressful time for a lot of people.
Yep.
But today we're going to look at more how stress and overwhelm affects the physical aspect of us and how exercise may or may not help it and that sort of side of things rather than coping strategies, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah.
Okie doke. So should we start with how exercise and moving more and being more physically aware can help with stress and overwhelm?
Yeah, I think that it's quite a tricky time, isn't it? Because a lot of us are feeling that we're more tired than normal, and there's this kind of inner turmoil, I think, between people wondering whether they should exercise a lot because that's supposed to help our stress levels, or should we rest. And for some people that have always done a lot of exercise, the concept of rest can be really quite challenging because it kind of goes against the grain and against what we're used to and our beliefs around, the benefits of exercise. But we do know that exercising can be a stress reliever, but we also know that it is a stressor. So it can be a stress reliever if you have got healthy levels of day-to-day stress. If you, however, are somebody that is quite stressed by maybe something at work and you're suffering with not very good quality sleep and you're waking up a lot and you're feeling tired throughout the day and you're using exercise as a way to de-stress, that is when actually the benefits are not so good. And that is because normally throughout the day, when we wake up, our stress hormones are at their highest because that's what alerts us, and then during the day they drop back down. So just before we go to bed, they should be at their lowest, so that at night time our body can produce sleep hormones and then we can sleep through the night. Now, sometimes when we're suffering with stress, what happens is that pattern is either reversed, so it's quite low in the morning and then it gets high at night and we can't sleep, or it becomes high all the time, or it becomes low all the time. If it's high all the time, we feel kind of tired but wired. If it's low all the time, we just don't have any energy. If we try to exercise when that pattern is anything but optimal, we then just add another stress into our lives. And so what we know is that there's various types of exercise that are particularly good at adding on extra stress. And this is basically aerobic exercise. So endurance exercise, running, cycling, hard swimming, that kind of thing. But conversely, exercise that might actually help us and help to settle down that ongoing stress are things that are more relaxing. So yoga or Pilates or Tai Chi or walking, that kind of thing. So when we've been exercising regularly for a long time and we're used to doing a lot of cardio exercise, we can often poo-poo other forms of exercise, like weightlifting or yoga or walking as really not being beneficial. But actually the benefits are just different. And just like, we're going through a transitional period in our life and things are changing, sometimes we need to change our exercise habits a little bit so that we don't become overwhelmed by it all. It can be really overwhelming if you're somebody that's used to exercising and you've got a routine and your energy levels are changing and you wake up in the morning thinking, well, I'm supposed to go for a 10-mile run today, but my body's actually saying, no way. And that's when it's really important to listen to your body so that you're not overdoing it. The other thing that can help is your diet, because if you're not fueling particularly well for exercise and you're feeling tired, and then you go out and you try and do the exercise anyway, you're going to deplete all your mineral stores and your energy stores even more. And when we're stressed, this has a big impact on certain micronutrients like magnesium and zinc and B vitamins, which are all used to make energy, but they're also all used to make stress hormones, and stress hormones will always be prioritized because they are part of our survival mechanism. So that is hardwired into us. It's not negotiable. We can't say to our bodies, you're not going to be stressed today, you're not going to produce those stress hormones, because actually if we did that, we'd die. And that's why we've got no power over it, because it's an innate built-in response. We can influence it. We can influence it through our lifestyle. And that is why, really paying attention to the sort of exercise you're doing and how often you're doing it and how you feel after, it is really important. Speaking from personal experience, I think that we've shared a similar kind of experience, you and I, Emily, and I'm sure other people have as well. And there's a couple of other experts in the hub that have too. And coming from an endurance exercise background, it's quite hard to break that pattern and either not exercise or choose different exercise, because you do still enjoy it. But it is easy to overdo it, and listening to your body is quite difficult if you're continuously exercising, because it becomes very hard to discern whether you're tired because of the exercise or you're tired because actually your body needs a rest. And during this period of transition, the perimenopause, you are going to need more rest. It is just one of those things, because your body is changing. And when our body changes and it's growing in different ways, we always need energy for that. And if we're expending it all on exercise, we can easily become overwhelmed by it. Yeah.
And as you say, we both speak from personal experience on this one. Yes. And I just wanted to add to that. I know personally I railed against it for a number of years and carried on training and carried on doing the same things, and really overlooked the fact that it was impacting. And for me personally, the biggie was New Year's Day this year, so New Year's Day 2019. My partner and I went for a 20-minute run. Now, to put this into context, 2 years ago I was training for Ironman, so a 20-minute run was small. And I had to sleep for 2 days afterwards.
Wow.
And so now I so wholeheartedly am a proponent for listen to what your body is saying.
Yeah.
I've totally changed how I exercise. I know you have totally changed how you exercise. And yeah, triathlon and things might well be back on the cards in 10 years' time. At the moment it isn't. And that's cool, because weightlifting's so much fun.
Yeah. Exactly. I think, there's it's difficult. Behavioral change is one of those things that's really, really difficult, because what we do becomes part of our identity, and so to change that is a scary thing. What we've got to remember is that going through the perimenopause is also a change in, for some of us, our identity, because it changes how we look, it changes how we feel, our energy is different. But it's easier if we try and look at what we can do to support ourselves through the process to make it less stressful, rather than fight against it. And it's a bit like running a marathon or doing a triathlon or, weight training. Instead of asking, when will this be over and how can I get to the end quickly, how quick am I going to run the marathon in, or when am I going to be able to lift, I don't know, 100 kilos or whatever, instead of looking at the end goal, if we just look at where we are at the moment and think, right, what can I do to support my body to feel less stressed, to feel less overwhelmed, so things are more manageable, and we break it down and we get help where we can, then, you know, that process of going through the process goals and the tiny steps will get us to the end much quicker than if we just are focusing on kind of getting out of it. So there's real parallels there anyway between exercise and between moving through this, I think.
Absolutely. And drawing again on the same parallel, going through a marathon, you wouldn't say, oh, I'm not going to have water at each water station because I've got to get to the finish. You'd stop and have some water, or
Yeah.
I know when I ran London Marathon a few years ago, I stopped and high-fived every single person who was high-fiving, because enjoy the moment, you know.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I know that's not helping people who are really deep in the pits of stress and overwhelm at the moment. I completely understand we're being slightly flippant, but actually, if you compare it to a marathon, the end is there. The medal is waiting for you.
Absolutely.
And you will get through.
Yeah, 100%. And there's no, with stress and overwhelm, you know, you can be stressed and you can be stressed and depressed. You know, often they go together, because after a period of time of being stressed, you know, your body is getting really tired, and with that can come feelings of hopelessness and feelings of despair. So it's very real. And again, having experienced it myself, I empathise with anyone that is going through that. It's not fun, but it doesn't have to be permanent. And I would urge anyone that feels like that to get help. You know, you can move through it. So I support women all the time with dietary changes and with lifestyle changes. You know, there are different tools that you can try to move through that, and to maybe make yourself a little bit, or not make yourself, but, you know, enable you to feel a little bit more supported and less kind of bogged down by things. We've got a real tendency as women to think that we've got to try and do everything. And again, I do think that some of this comes back to us trying to prove that we're equal to men, and that, you know, there's no difference. And I'll say it again, we're definitely equal, but we are very different. And just as with pregnancy, you know, when you're going through a period of your life that is different and you're transitioning, sometimes you need a little bit more rest. Sometimes you need to say no more. Sometimes you need to change the way that you're eating a bit. And you know, by that I don't mean necessarily that you need to make massive dietary changes. It might be that you need to stop cooking everything from scratch and buy a few more, you know, pre-prepared foods. So I'm not against pre-prepared foods at all, and I think they can make your life easier and they can take some of the stress out. And actually, if grabbing some frozen vegetables or some already peeled and chopped vegetables and some packets of salads and you know, things like that, make it much easier for you to eat healthily and get the nutrients in, then why not? What's wrong with that? What's wrong with buying a fresh soup? Absolutely nothing. So there's different ways that, you know, you can look at what's going on in your life and try and take some of the effort out of it, so that it's really, you know, not as hard for you.
Yeah, and just tying this in, because this is December, stress and overwhelm. Obviously, Christmas time is a hugely stressful time for a lot of people. Exactly as you've just said, actually look at the big picture of what you need to achieve. So your marathon is Christmas Day. What do you need to achieve? How can you just break it down into little bits that makes it easier? So is it that you get the sprouts pre-peeled? Or do you know what? You ditch the sprouts because no one in your family likes sprouts, for example. There isn't a law to say you have to have sprouts.
Really? No, it's
big news.
I like sprouts. I love sprouts. No, but you're right, 100% right. So, you know, we've got this rule in our family where we don't, you know, my brothers and I don't buy for each other, and, you know, we've made it really simple, and we make Christmas Day really simple as well. So if you love a big extravagant Christmas, then that's amazing, but just make sure that it is within your realms of doability, and that you're not going to be overwhelmed by it. And it's okay to change. It's all right that you don't do the same thing as you did last year and the year before and the year before that. That's perfectly fine. Just really enjoy it is what I would say. If you're panicking about it and you're dreading it, then stand back and ask yourself why that is, and what could you do to make that a little bit easier for yourself, and what can you do to take the pressure off, so that you have a little bit more time for you, so that you can relax a little bit more. I always say to people, try and have two or three things that you do during the day that are for you. So even if it's 5 or 10 minutes, can you sit down with a book for 10 minutes? Can you have a cup of tea for 5 minutes? Can you go and have a nice bubble bath at the end of the day and unwind? Is it that you like to get out and have a walk? Think about things that will take your mind off, the stress of work and the hustle and bustle and all the thoughts that you're having, that can just sort of bring you back to yourself, so that you're enjoying something different that is going to de-stress you a little bit. And it might not be exercise, it might be something else, like going for a walk, or reading a book, or having a bubble bath.
And really important in that is that self-care isn't selfish. Because I think too many of us think, oh, well, I've got to put everybody else first because I'm the woman of the household or whatever. Yeah. And oh, I can't sit down and have a book, read a book. Everyone will think I'm lazy. No, that's not lazy. That's just, it's the whole thing of putting on your life. What's the thing in the aeroplanes? You put on your gas mask. That's it before you do anyone else's. And stopping for that 10 minutes is simply putting yours on first. That's all, isn't it?
Exactly that. I think that when I work with women, I would say that is the main thing, one of the main things that underlies a lot of problems, anything from digestive problems to stress, insomnia, not feeling very confident, is self-care, because we're just not brought up to do that. I'd love some stories, actually. I'd love to hear from women whose mothers or grandmothers or whatever taught them, to take some time out every day and to not iron and clean and cook and prepare, and to actually go and do whatever they want, and not feel guilty about that, because that's massive for overwhelm and stress. It really is. Yeah.
Just quickly tying back into where we were at the start with the people who rely on endurance exercise, when that's been carved out as your me time, it's very difficult then to change that.
Yeah, because you get into this mindset that this is common. There's this mindset that it's beneficial, and that without doing it you would be a horrible person, and that you wouldn't be nice to your kids or your family. Actually, I've got my own views on that, and that those are the sort of things that I used to tell myself as well. And I see this all the time in various groups and on forums, and I would ask people to challenge that belief. And where does it come from, and why are you actually telling yourself that? And is it me time? Because are you still and really kind of thinking about your emotions, or processing things, or are you actually being distracted by how fast you're going and the pace you're doing and your heart rate and whether you've eaten or drunk for the last 15 minutes? It's very different going for a run and running mindfully, if you've ever tried it, where you are actually visualizing what each muscle in your body is doing, and your lungs expanding and contracting, and you're listening to every single sound, from your heartbeat to your breath to the wind to your feet on the floor. and looking at different things than it is to repeatedly looking at your watch and counting the miles off. You know, it's two very different experiences, which will give you two very different things. So yes, exercise can be more mindful, but for most people it's not. And it's, yeah, I challenge that whole thing about me time.
Yeah.
Having been
Mindful running is one of the world's beautiful things. It really is.
Yeah, definitely. And it's not about, and if you do it without a watch, it's definitely more about feeling your body and stepping back a lot. I mean, you will probably be a lot slower, but often you'll end up getting faster because you're slower, if that makes sense. So you know, by pulling back and not having that constant stress of having to always be as fast as you were on the run before, which I don't care what anyone says, everyone that has ever run and trained for something does that, because you are constantly in a competition with yourself at the very least, because, you know, this whole mantra thing of like, the only person that I've got to be better than is the person I was yesterday. Why? What was wrong with you yesterday? Weren't you a good person yesterday? Were you not good enough yesterday? You know, and it's this whole thing of like, well, I'm not quite there yet, so I need to be better and better and better. And I just, you know, I just would challenge that whole belief.
Yeah, I agree. And, you know, personal trainer me, just jumping in with that hat on, would always support mindful running. And I have to say, it's the one thing I really miss with not being able to do cardio exercise at the moment, is not being able to just take my dogs and just go and be in nature whilst running.
Yeah,
it'll come back.
But you can do mindful walking.
Absolutely.
And I actually think that's easier. I think it's easier because, you know, you're not running, and you get just as much from it. So you definitely see more. So massive benefits for that as well.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. I think we've covered off a lot of things there, and hopefully it'll be useful for people watching.
Yeah. The only other thing, last thing, sorry, before we finish, to say would be, if you are feeling overwhelmed and stressed, and you're noticing that you're kind of reaching for kind of sugary foods or caffeine or alcohol even, then, you know, listen to that as a signal, as that maybe you need to take a little bit of time out and unload a little bit. You know, one of the things that I think that we're all guilty of is not really recognizing when that's happened. So feeling tired and reaching for that coffee, getting to the end of the day and going, God, I've had an awful day, give me a gin and tonic or give me a glass of wine. And there's nothing wrong with gin and tonic or wine, I just like to say. But if you're doing that repeatedly because you've had an awful day, that is your signal that maybe you've got too much going on, and maybe, you know, unload a little bit. Yeah,
and it's as with everything, it's noticing the cues for why you're doing something rather than not doing that thing.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Claire.
You're welcome.